records and inquire as to whether this person had a record, they're instructed to tell that person that a record does not exist.
So it's not exactly destroyed.
It's not exactly destroyed.
Kept safely and separate.
That's correct. There are a limited number of circumstances where records of an expunged offense can be used. For instance, if a judge is setting bail, he can take a look at this record of this offense that was expunged. The parole board can get their hands on these records if need to. But for the vast majority of people, they're not expunging these criminal records for any sort of reason other than something that's personal. Many people expunge these records because a criminal record is a bar to certain employment. A criminal record may be a bar to getting into a certain college or grad school that you want. Professional licenses.
Like being an attorney, right?
Yes, may be affected by the fact that there is a criminal record. Many times you get a client that comes in and they're faced with a charge, and their first concern is, I have a professional license.
Right.
What is this going to do? So if someone has a record and they're able to expunge it, then they're able to go pursue that professional license that may have eluded them. Certain fields, healthcare, working with children, education, that sort of thing. It's very important that someone has a clean record. Even something like an adoption or becoming a foster parent. No one's going to really give you a child to take care of if they see something seedy in your past.
And what is the time frame for all of this? If I come to your office today and I say, let's do this, we'll be done in a month, 2 months, a year?
Generally, once we serve the petition, the judge will set a date for a hearing that's somewhere between 30 to 60 days out. And the point of setting it at that sort of time frame is to give all these law enforcement agencies and different courts time to scour their records and ascertain whether there's a basis for them to have an objection.
Do you have to go out of state to find out if there's convictions outside of New Jersey?
For expungement, out-of-state convictions will count if you have like a prior or subsequent conviction and may be a bar to expungement.
But how do you give them notice unless your client tells you that they have an out-of-state?
A lot of times you have to rely on your client because the statute only requires that you give notice to a particular, well, if you have an out-of-state conviction, you want to expunge that, you have to go to the state where that conviction is to expunge.
So you can't get me off my charges in, not the charges, but my convictions in Texas?
Well, that and the fact that I'm a New Jersey attorney, that sort of thing.
So let's ask about some specifics. What if I have a motor vehicle violation? Say that I have a conviction for driving while suspended. Can you get that to go away?
No. Expungements are purely something that exists in the field of criminal law. The Motor Vehicle Code, Title 39, cannot expunge any sort of conviction or motor vehicle ticket that you may get in that section. People in New Jersey, we have to drive every day, and the state has an interest in knowing what our driving history is like, and the Motor Vehicle Code is built, as you may know, in a way where they carve out specific penalties and fines if you get subsequent charges in a particular offense. For instance, DWI. The length of time that your license may be suspended, it increases as you get more offenses. We have an interest to protect people on our roadways. In the field of criminal law, we like to think that if someone's going to violate a statute, it's going to be a one-time thing. So that's why we give them this benefit that if it really is a one-time violation, everyone makes a mistake, makes a poor decision, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they should live with the stigma of committing a crime or an offense for the rest of their lives.
So if an individual comes to you and says, it's 15 years ago that I got driving while intoxicated, can you make it go away? The answer is?
Can't make it go away. Unfortunately, your driving abstract is going to follow you throughout your history. That's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is.
But someone who does get convicted of that doesn't need to say on a application, I was convicted of a crime, correct?
No, DWI is not a crime. It is a motor vehicle offense. Increasingly, employers may be asking, depending on the field, if you have ever been convicted of a DWI, and in that case, you would have to answer truthfully that you were. But if the question is, have you ever been convicted of a crime or an offense, you can answer no if you've been convicted of DWI.
How many expungement requests come across your desk in a year?
Every few months, someone remembers that they did something a few years ago
Right.
that they'd really just like to see off their record. And they come and they say, I did this, like you said, 15 years ago. And since then, I've led a law-abiding life. I've never had any other charges. I've never been arrested for anything else. And I just want to see this go away. And I mentioned there were a variety of employment reasons or for perhaps professional license that you want to obtain, that people want to expunge their record. But I see a lot of people that have just very personal reasons. They understand that they made a mistake a long time ago. That's not indicative of who they are. So they say, it's going to make me feel better to know that this is not on my record anymore.
The law of expungements, is there a great deal of case law that informs this, or is it a pretty simple procedure and there's not much controversy?
It's a pretty simple procedure if you file the correct documents and you do your background and you know that there's not going to be any specific bars to expungement. There is some suggestion that expungement should be granted. Prosecutors shouldn't go out of their way to try to keep someone from getting a final order of expungement. You want to give people incentives to remain law-abiding.
Is it lawful for you to tell a client who is contemplating a deal that would resolve a contemporary charge to say, go ahead, if you choose to plead guilty, we'll expunge it in a year or two? In other words, let's say, again, I'll use myself, I come to your office, and since we're in the same office, I come to my office, and I come talk to you, and I say, look, I have these charges, what can we do? And you say, well, if you're going to plead guilty, we'll expunge it in a year. Can you do that? Can you tell people before they want to expunge it that there's a potential in the future to make it go away?
Well, a lot of people, when they come in, it's actually brought up by them. They'll say, I'm contemplating this deal, what are my options? Can I have it expunged down the road? And it's perfectly appropriate for us to tell them, yes, this is an offense that is expungible. If you plead guilty to this in 5 years, for 5 years you have to live with that, but after that time, it's something that can be expunged and, essentially for all intents and purposes erased from your record.
So what about juveniles? There are juveniles who engage in certain bad behavior and then they have a record. Do they get expungements, or does that work differently?
No, juveniles can petition the court for expungements, and while you're a juvenile, you're not being convicted of a crime or an offense. You're adjudicated as a juvenile delinquent. When the time comes to expunge the record of that delinquency, the time frame in which you have to wait, whether it be 10 years for a crime, 5 years for an offense, it's the same time frame for a juvenile as it would be for an adult who had committed that same offense.
Even though we can get records expunged, there is such a mass of information online and in publications that are not state-owned. We can't make that go away, right? Because I know of some instances where, for example, on a recent show, I had a reporter from the New Jersey Herald, and he writes articles specific to legal issues. And so if there's an article that's archived that says Dan Agatino was convicted of harassment in Sussex County Superior Court, I can't make that go away, right?
That's correct. Unfortunately, we live in an age where the media controls everything. Anything can be put on the internet, and once it's there, it's essentially there for good. And so while an expungement has an effect of expunging records that are held, in state agencies and law enforcement, unfortunately, we can't do anything to police what is dissipated on the internet.